Hi, I'm Doreen Pietrantoni, an instructional technology specialist at Monroe #1 BOCES. This is number one of a recorded series focused on the New York State Computer Science and Digital Fluency Standards. Today, we're going to focus on the background and why. In subsequent videos, we will focus on each of the concept areas of these standards. Again, this is number one of a series, and we're going to delve right into the objectives. So we're going to review the visions of the standards, the timeline for implementation, guiding principles that help the creation and review of the standards. And I'm going to reiterate frequently that the standards are for all learners, grades K through 12 in all curricular areas. And then we're going to understand the why of the standards. Why are these standards important for today's learners? First, let's start with the background. So the standards were started in 2018 when a group of stakeholders met in Albany. The stakeholders include public educators, teachers, administrators, and librarians, as well as higher ed level educators and agencies such as Computer Science for All, other agencies that have STEAM programs and computer science programs that are used in New York schools, as well as the NYS representatives and a consultant brought in who had created these standards with other states and was helping New York State create their standards. Once the standards were created by groups of people who focused on specific concept areas, they went to review, and then there were some adaptations, and then they went to review through the regions. The regions gave it a conditional approval with the caveat that the primary levels needed to be further fleshed out to make sure they were appropriate for that grade level of learners. Primary experts were brought in, the standards went back to review from the regions, and they were approved. The vision for the computer science and digital fluency standards is as follows. Every student will know how to live productively and safely in a technology-dominated world. This includes understanding the essential features of digital technologies, why and how they work, and how to communicate and create using those technologies. There were several lenses for approval. So when we think about this, with the creation and the first level of approval and then the final regions approvals, these lenses were used. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each lens, starting with clarity and focus. The standards should be limited in number and should focus on the most important concepts and skills that should be acquired by students. Equity. The standards support a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. Coherence and progression. Standards should be organized as progressions that support student learning of content and practices over multiple grade levels. Coherence refers to how well a set of standards conveys a unified vision, establishing connections among the major areas of study, and shows a meaningful progression of content across grade spans. Interdisciplinary connections. The standards should complement other New York State learning standards and promote learning across disciplines. Rigor. Standards should establish and articulate the appropriate level of rigor to prepare all students for success in college and careers. Rigor in this context can be understood as challenge. A rigorous standard should challenge students to increase their knowledge and skills. Relevant and engaging. Standards should be connected to appropriate real-world challenges, should motivate and empower students, promote individual growth and lifelong learning, and prepare students to adapt and prosper in a world that is increasingly influenced and shaped by technology advancements. Specificity. Standards should be neither too broad nor too specific, and the granularity or the degree of specificity should be consistent across the standards. Then there was also the guiding principles that helped in the development and review of the standards. Equity and access. Equity and diversity should be attended to, allowing for engagement by all students and flexibility in how students may demonstrate proficiency. The standards support a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. Interdisciplinary connections. The standards will complement and promote learning across disciplines. And I definitely will highlight that in some of the standards that we talk about. Coherence. The standards should be focused on the most important knowledge and skills that all students need to know. The standards will be clearly written, demonstrate vertical and horizontal alignment, and articulate a clear learning progression. Relevance and engagement. The standards will motivate and empower students, allow for focus on appropriate real-world challenges, and will prepare students to adapt and prosper in a world that is increasingly influenced and shaped by technological advancements. We need to really focus that the standards are for all learners. All learners should be engaging in learning experiences in which these standards are integrated. As with all facets of work with NYS, equity has been a guiding principle during the standards development process. The executive committee, authoring group, and review panels reviewed every standard through a lens of equity and diversity. The standards were crafted to allow for engagement by all students and provide flexibility in how students may demonstrate proficiency. English language learners. ELLs, language minority learners, and students acquiring academic English often struggle to access the language and therefore the knowledge that fills the pages of academic text, despite their linguistic assets. In turn, these students are overrepresented among students identified with disabilities. Instruction needs to not only meet but exceed standards and provide multiple ways for students to demonstrate understanding and skills as part of the system-wide initiative to promote equal access to learning for all students while capitalizing on linguistic and cultural diversity. Students with disabilities. One of the fundamental tenets guiding education legislation is that all students, including students with disabilities, can achieve high standards of academic performance. A related trend is the increasing knowledge and skills expectations for pre-K to grade 12 students required for success in post-secondary education and 21st century careers. Supports and services for special education must include instruction that is adapted as appropriate, the content, methodology, or delivery of the instruction to address the unique needs that result from the student's disability. Early learning. The standards should be implemented with careful understanding of child development and developmentally appropriate practice, specifically for our young learners. As these standards are implemented, it is important to meet the needs of the whole child, recognizing that a well-rounded education, positive learning environment, strong home-school connection, and high expectations all contribute to student success. Let's talk about the timeline, because this is very important for all districts across the state to know and for implementation to be successful. So from December 2020 to August 2021, there was awareness building. There were some rollouts from the state, some talking about it at different conferences, and just building that awareness that the new standards and the timeline for implementation. September 21 to August 2023, that's the capacity building. That's focusing on curriculum development, looking at your current lessons, seeing how you can integrate the standards authentically into those lessons, resource acquisition, and then professional development. September of 2023 through August of 2024 is year one of implementation for all credit computer science courses that will be aligned to the standards. This is very important for educators who are teaching computer science courses to understand this. And then September 2024, there'll be full implementation. The standards will be implemented in all grade bands K-12. Let's look a little bit about the why. Why do we need to implement these standards now? So we are in the fourth industrial revolution. And I think that most people think we're talking about technology. We're talking about computers. So isn't that still the third industrial revolution? But we've far surpassed basic computing. We are now talking about artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous vehicles, quantum computing, 3D printing. I mean, all of these elements have pushed us into the fourth industrial revolution. And that's something very important to recognize. When you think about some of the tools that we use today compared to the tools that we used, say, in the 1990s, there has been a vast transition of technology that is part of our everyday lives. Smartphones, having things like a Nest thermostat or an Alexa in your house. That's that artificial intelligence. The robotics. I mean, robotics are now in classrooms where students can use them and you do coding and things like that. So it's our world has changed vastly with that. And thinking about the convergence of technologies, when we have a cell phone that I can use to do more than calling or texting, I can access email, I can print from there, I can take high quality images, I can interact in different apps, I can manage my home thermostat or see who's at my front door through my cell phone. So we have a convergence of technology that adds to that fourth industrial revolution. One thing that we think about with the why is, okay, we need to have skilled workers. And if we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we need to have workers that have the skills to prosper in this revolution, right? And that's very important. So when we look at the skilled workers we currently have, we have white collar jobs, which I'm sure people are familiar with that term, as well as with blue collar, but we also have new collar jobs. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these. And new collar is probably a new term for you. So for white collar, typically these are jobs in an office, require a formal education like a bachelor's degree, and have a high starting pay that is often on salary basis. Blue collar jobs are labor jobs that generally people work with their hands. Formal education not required, but they may have gone through a vocational certification process. And the starting wage is usually hourly and generally low, and particularly in low or no skill jobs. Let's talk about new collar jobs. So new collar jobs are typically more technical or hands-on, but are not limited to a particular setting, may not require a traditional college degree, but the person needs to have considerable skill or talent, either learned or self-taught. And then the starting wage is often much higher than many jobs available to workers with only a high school diploma. So thinking about some jobs that might fall under that would be some programmers, people who have developed new industries, like we have, Uber and things like DoorDash and things like that. So that innovation behind those different fields fall under that new collar job. So what does this mean for our future workforce? Well, we definitely know our future workforce is going to need technology skills, but they also are going to need those soft skills, those skills that are going to work well with the technology skills to make the student a skilled worker. And that's where these standards help with those different skills. So if you look at this is the top 10 skills of 2025 that are desired by employers. So this is the Future of Jobs Report 2020 from the World Economic Forum. And if you look, we have a mixture of skills here. If you look at the scale here, we have problem solving, which is the blue, self-management, which is the greenish color, the tan color is working with people, and technology use and development is like the purplish color. So if you look at this, you'll see that there is a mix of skills here that are soft skills and technology skills, and skills that we still need to work on, like that leadership or that complex problem solving and critical thinking, as well as the technology use and design and programming. I'm going to go further into this to show you some more information. So if you look at this, it talks about the top 10 most important hard skills. So those are like your technology skills, and the top 10 most important soft skills. And these are chosen by recruiters and hiring managers. So if we look at this, you'll see in the yellow graph here, we have teamwork, communication, time management, problem solving. You have a whole list here of things that are important for employees to have according to recruiters and hiring managers. And these are considered soft skills. And then if we look at these hard skills, we have high-level IT skills, analytical skills, basic computer knowledge, customer service skills, presentation skills, team and project management, marketing, writing. So even though we might be a computer programmer and we're writing code, we still need to be able to have writing skills to be able to communicate clearly. Communication is number 2 in the top 10 soft skills. So thinking about that, it's really important that our learners have this to be successful college, career, and life. And thinking about how the standards work with these skills, you'll definitely see these soft skills and hard skills within these standards. Another important thing to focus on is looking at New York. Okay, so we have over 21,000 open computing jobs. That's almost 3 times the state average demand rate with an average salary of 105,000. But only 48% of our public schools teach a computer science class. So if we don't have, more than half of our schools aren't teaching computer science, where are our learners going to get the top 10 important hard skills and soft skills if we're not teaching this in all of our schools across the state? So thinking about that and looking at how these standards are K-12, we want to get our early learners integrating that technology and using iteration and algorithms and computational thinking in all curricular areas as they start in grade K and go all the way up to 12, because we want them to be able to have those skills as they graduate from high school. And as they're building on those skills, they're developing those skills and they're adding them to their toolkit and making them more and more proficient with today's technology needs. So let's take a look at the standards. I'm just going to show you how they're written and what each component means. There are 5 concept areas to the standards. There's impacts of computing, computational thinking, networks and system design, cybersecurity, and digital literacy. So let's look about how we read the standards. So we have the grade band, which is here, and these are how the grade bands are listed. You have the concept area. There's abbreviation for each concept area. CT means computational thinking. And then you have the standard number. I'm going to show you what it looks like written out. So you have your grade band. This is grades 4 through 6. You have your standard identifier. So 4 through 6, computational thinking, standard 3. The standard language is visualize a simple data set in order to highlight relationships and persuade an audience. There also is included a clarifying statement. The emphasis is on identifying and organizing relevant data to emphasize particular parts of the data in support of a claim. So it's just the clarifying statement helps you understand the standard statement more. There are also some great examples on the site that's going to be included with the resources with this recording that will show you multiple examples per standard for each grade level. Thinking about this, if I think about the language of this standard, it says visualizing a simple data set in order to highlight relationships and persuade an audience. So I could be looking at a chart in social studies about maybe population growth, and I can develop a presentation on how to persuade an audience. That is something that I definitely feel would fit into the next gen ELA standards or the social studies framework. So thinking about that and that connection between these standards and our New York State learning standards, there definitely is a clear connection. And you will see with these standards, there's also a clear connection with the social emotional learning benchmarks as well. So what's really nice is there are some standards at a glance documents on the website that I'm going to be providing with this video. I'm going to click on one so that you can see it. So what's nice about these is that it takes one grade band, and this is could be printed as a double-sided document, and I could have these next to my computer, and I can make sure that I have them close to me so that as I'm creating learning experiences or adapting other learning experiences, I can see how to authentically add these standards to those learning experiences. So if you look, they're broken up in concept area. So impacts of computing is the blue, and you'll see these are the sub-concept areas of that concept area. And you'll see that these are all the standards for K through 1. Remember, there's not a lot of standards. We tried to make them a manageable amount, and you'll see that they're very clearly written. And I'm going to scroll down. You'll also see that for this particular standard, it begins at grade band 2-3. You will see that throughout here that some of the standards don't start to a certain age, or there's mastery after a certain grade band. As I scroll through, I can see the different concept areas and sub-concept areas and understand ways to do this. I want you to understand also is that these are computer science and digital fluency standards, but not everything has to be technology based. It doesn't always have to be about robotics and coding. An algorithm is a step of directions. Decomposition is taking things apart and making it smaller so that you can solve a problem. So like with a story problem, for example, you can break it into smaller parts and help you solve that problem. I'm also going to show you another grade band. One thing you might want to do if you're a 4 through 6 educator, you might want to look at the 2, 3, and 7, 8 grade bands, just so you're familiar with what your students are coming in with and what skills they need to have to go on to the next grade band. It will help you make sure that your students have proficiency or mastery over these standards. Again, it's the same layout. I just wanted to show you a different set of grade bands so you can see. In grade K1, it was, understanding the algorithms, what an algorithm is. This is comparing 2 or more algorithms. So looking at that, that progression so that we're building on their knowledge from each grade band so they have that proficiency and mastery as they go through. So these are just some examples of the resources that will be provided for you at the end of this presentation, things that you can use immediately to help getting that understanding, that awareness of the standards, and then hopefully developing a fluency with the standards. So let's think a moment about what your next steps might be. What do you think you need to do in order to prepare yourself for the integration of these standards in your particular classroom, in your grade band, in your curricular area, thinking about how you can help yourself with the awareness timeframe that we have so that in 2024, when all grade bands and all curricular areas need to integrate these standards, you're going to be prepared. I want you to know that I'm always available. If you're from the Monroe #1 BOCES region, you can reach out to me. I can help you evaluate your lesson plans and integrate these standards. We can also talk about different tools that you might have available to you from BOCES, such as robotics and things like that, that you can use with your classroom to also help integrate these standards. Anything that you need, you can just use my contact information that's going to be provided to connect with me. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this presentation today. Remember, this is just number 1 in a series. It was about the background and the why. The next video in this series, we are going to delve into the impacts of computing concept area, where I'm going to show you some examples and we're going to learn about how to integrate those standards by unpacking them and really looking at the components of each of the standards so that you can better understand what that means for your curricular area and for your grade band. Again, thank you for listening.